The book of Nehemiah tells a powerful story. It is a narrative that has inspired countless generations, a tale of resilience and unwavering faith. This story is not just about the rebuilding of physical walls, but also about the restoration of a community's spirit and faith. It's a story about faith, courage, and leadership. Nehemiah's journey is a testament to what can be achieved when one is driven by a higher purpose and a deep sense of duty. His actions were fueled by a profound love for his people and an unshakable belief in his mission. Nehemiah, a Jewish exile, became a leader in a time of crisis. Despite being far from his homeland, his heart remained with Jerusalem. His story begins in the Persian Empire, where he held a significant position, yet his thoughts were always with his people. He led the rebuilding of Jerusalem's walls. This was no small feat. It required immense planning, coordination, and the ability to inspire a demoralized population. Nehemiah's leadership was instrumental in rallying the people to undertake this monumental task. He also helped to restore the faith of his people. Through his guidance, the community found a renewed sense of purpose and hope. Nehemiah's efforts were not just about physical reconstruction but also about spiritual revival. Nehemiah was a cupbearer to the Persian king, Artaxerxes. This position was one of great trust and responsibility, as he was in close proximity to the king and had significant influence. Despite his comfortable life, Nehemiah's thoughts were always with his people. He lived in a comfortable palace. The luxuries and privileges of his position could have easily made him complacent, but Nehemiah's heart was restless. He could not ignore the plight of his people and the desolation of his beloved city. However, his heart ached for his people and his city, Jerusalem. It was in ruins. The once great city lay desolate, its walls broken and its people scattered and disheartened. This sight deeply troubled Nehemiah. The walls were broken down. The people were discouraged. The sense of despair was palpable, and the community was in dire need of a leader who could inspire and guide them through these dark times. When Nehemiah heard about the state of Jerusalem, he was deeply moved. The news of his city's condition struck him to the core, and he could not remain indifferent. His sorrow was profound, and he knew he had to act. He wept and prayed for days. Nehemiah's response to the crisis was one of deep spiritual reflection. He turned to God, seeking solace and guidance, pouring out his heart in fervent prayer. Nehemiah confessed the sins of his people. He acknowledged their failings and sought forgiveness, understanding that true restoration required both physical and spiritual renewal. He asked God for guidance and strength. God heard Nehemiah's prayer. His heartfelt pleas did not go unanswered. Nehemiah's faith and dedication were recognized, and he received the divine support he sought. He saw his broken heart and his desire to help his people. Nehemiah's compassion and determination were evident, and his prayers reflected his deep commitment to his mission. God raised Nehemiah to be a leader. He was chosen to guide his people through this challenging period, to rebuild not just the walls of Jerusalem but also the spirit of its inhabitants. He would use him to bring about restoration and hope. Nehemiah's leadership and faith would become a beacon of hope, leading his people towards a brighter future and a restored Jerusalem. Nehemiah's burden for Jerusalem was not just a feeling of sadness. It was a deep, consuming concern that weighed heavily on his heart. The city of his ancestors lay in ruins, and the people were in great trouble and disgrace. This was not something he could simply ignore or push aside. It was a call to action. Nehemiah felt a divine compulsion to do something about the situation. He couldn't just sit back and hope someone else would take care of it. He knew that he had to be the one to step up and make a difference. He knew he had to do something. The resolve in his heart grew stronger each day. He began to pray fervently, seeking guidance and strength from God. He planned meticulously, considering every detail of what needed to be done. Nehemiah couldn't ignore the plight of his people. The sight of Jerusalem's broken walls and burned gates haunted him. He felt their pain as his own and knew that action was necessary to restore their dignity and safety. Nehemiah decided to approach the king. This was no small decision. As the cupbearer to King Artaxerxes, he had a position of trust, but also of great risk. Speaking out of turn or making requests could lead to severe consequences. This was a risky move. Nehemiah was well aware of the potential dangers, yet his conviction and faith drove him forward. He prepared himself mentally and spiritually for the encounter, knowing that his mission was just and righteous. He was, after all, just a cupbearer. In the grand scheme of the Persian Empire, he was a lowly servant. But Nehemiah believed that with God's help, even a cupbearer could achieve great things. Yet Nehemiah trusted God to guide him. He prayed earnestly, asking for favor in the eyes of the king. His faith was unwavering, and he believed that God would open the doors necessary for him to fulfill his mission. When Artaxerxes noticed Nehemiah's sadness, he asked him about it. This was Nehemiah's opportunity. He had to choose his words carefully, explaining the depth of his sorrow and his desire to help his people. He told the king about his desire to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. He spoke with passion and conviction, laying out his plans and the reasons behind them. His sincerity and dedication were evident. Amazingly, the king granted Nehemiah's request. This was a monumental moment. Not only did Artaxerxes agree to Nehemiah's plan, but he also offered his full support. He even provided him with resources. The king's generosity was beyond what Nehemiah had hoped for. He received royal decrees and the necessary provisions to begin the reconstruction. Artaxerxes gave him letters of safe passage. These letters ensured that Nehemiah could travel safely through the territories, facing no opposition from local governors. He also gave him materials like timber. These were essential for rebuilding the walls and gates of Jerusalem. The king's support was comprehensive and generous. Nehemiah's faith and courage were rewarded. His dedication and trust in God had led to a miraculous outcome. With the king's support and God's guidance, Nehemiah was ready to embark on the monumental task of rebuilding Jerusalem. The journey to Jerusalem was a significant and arduous one. Nehemiah, a man of great faith and determination, embarked on this journey with a clear mission in mind. He was driven by a deep sense of purpose and a calling to restore the ancient city to its former glory. The task of rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem was monumental. Nehemiah faced numerous challenges, both logistical and emotional. The ruins of the city were a constant reminder of past failures and the immense work that lay ahead. He encountered fierce opposition from various quarters. There were those who did not want to see Jerusalem rise again. They saw Nehemiah's efforts as a threat to their own power and influence. Among his most vocal opponents were Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem. These men were influential figures who used their power to try and thwart Nehemiah's plans at every turn. They mocked and ridiculed Nehemiah, attempting to undermine his authority and morale. Their words were filled with scorn and derision, aimed at breaking the spirit of Nehemiah and his workers. These men did everything in their power to discourage the workers. They spread rumors and lies, hoping to create doubt and fear among those who were laboring to rebuild the walls. Their opposition escalated to the point where they even plotted to attack the workers. The threat of violence loomed large, adding to the already immense pressure on Nehemiah and his team. But Nehemiah refused to be intimidated. He took decisive action, arming the workers and posting guards to protect them. His leadership was marked by both courage and strategic thinking. Nehemiah continually encouraged the people, reminding them of the importance of their work. He fostered a sense of community and shared purpose, which kept the workers motivated despite the constant threats. He also reminded them that they were not alone in their efforts. Nehemiah's faith was a cornerstone of his leadership. He assured the workers that God was on their side, providing them with divine support and protection. Despite the relentless opposition, the work progressed rapidly. The workers, inspired by Nehemiah's leadership and their faith, labored tirelessly. Their dedication and hard work began to show tangible results. In an astonishingly short period of just 52 days, the walls of Jerusalem were completed. This remarkable achievement was a testament to the power of faith, determination, and collective effort. The completion of the walls amazed everyone, including Nehemiah's enemies. It was a feat that not only restored the physical structure of the city but also the spirit and pride of its people. While Nehemiah focused on rebuilding the city walls, another leader emerged to address the spiritual state of the people. Ezra, a priest and scribe, arrived in Jerusalem with a copy of the Law of Moses. Ezra gathered the people together. He read aloud from the law. He explained its meaning. The people listened intently. They realized how far they had strayed from God's commands. This event led to a powerful spiritual revival. The people wept as they confessed their sins. They made a covenant to obey God's law. This renewed commitment to God was crucial for the restoration of Jerusalem. Section 5. Restoring Holiness. Nehemiah's reforms for a godly society. Nehemiah wasn't content with just rebuilding the walls. He wanted to see a complete restoration of Jerusalem. This included a return to holiness and righteousness. Nehemiah instituted a number of reforms. He dealt with the problem of mixed marriages. He ensured the fair treatment of the poor. He also restored the proper observance of the Sabbath. These reforms were not always popular, some people resisted change, but Nehemiah persevered, knowing that true restoration involved both the physical and the spiritual. Section 6, Nehemiah and Jesus, Foreshadowing Ultimate Restoration. The story of Nehemiah points to a greater restoration that would come through Jesus Christ. Like Nehemiah, Jesus came to rebuild what was broken. He came to restore people to a right relationship with God. Nehemiah rebuilt the physical walls of Jerusalem. Jesus, however, came to break down the walls of sin that separated people from God. He offered forgiveness and new life. Nehemiah faced opposition from those who wanted to keep the people in a state of brokenness. Jesus, too, encountered resistance from religious leaders who rejected his message of grace and truth. Section 7, Lessons for Today, Applying Nehemiah's Example in Modern Life. The book of Nehemiah offers timeless lessons for believers today. It teaches us about the importance of prayer and obedience to God. Nehemiah's story encourages us to act on our faith. We can learn from Nehemiah's courage. He faced opposition with determination. He didn't allow fear to stop him. Nehemiah's example encourages us to stand up for what is right, even when it's difficult. Nehemiah's leadership is also inspiring. He led with wisdom and compassion. He motivated people to work together. We too can be leaders in our own spheres of influence. Section 8, A Legacy of Faith, Nehemiah's Enduring Impact. The story of Nehemiah is an inspiration. He was a man of prayer. He was a man of action. He was a man who loved his people and his God. Nehemiah's legacy continues to inspire us today. It reminds us that God can use ordinary people to do extraordinary things. When we respond to God's call, He can use us to bring about His purposes. Nehemiah's story challenges us to be people of faith. It encourages us to be people of courage. It inspires us to be people of action.